As we discussed at length on the floor, this year's budget process was a complete disaster and a terrible precedent to be set. We cannot allow the new normal for spending taxpayer money to become just two guys writing a budget in secret and then jamming it through the process at the very last minute, full of pork and appeasing lobbyists, but the most vulnerable among us, or everyday citizens, not being included. And to be clear, lawmakers did not finish the fiscal year 2025 state budget by the constitutional deadline, except in the most technical sense. Sure, we granted final passage to the appropriations bills before 6 p.m. today, but as even the governor has noted, fiscal year 2025 budget is grossly incomplete. That's because several lawmakers running in Republican primaries for statewide office want to be able to claim credit for imposing big cuts in state spending. But all they really did was lowball the estimated costs of several state programs that everyone who is being honest about the situation knows will require substantially more spending authority to fully fund. So that means that an actual the fiscal 2025 budget will have to come back and pass what the governor called the largest supplemental budget in our state's history. That will take place either in a special session called by Governor Parson later this year, or in early next year on a supplemental recommended by the new governor. Now, if that happens to be me, then I look forward to delivering a plan that uses some of the nearly $2 billion in revenue we have available to fill the spending gaps in the current fiscal year budget, and then some. But we could end up with a new governor who's okay with slashing the vital life-saving services and doesn't care if people suffer or even die as a result. That is scary, but it's very real. It's a very real prospect made possible because the majority failed to really fulfill its job today. I want to highlight just a couple of the things that we are happy about in the budget, some things that we're frustrated by, and hand it over to the budget members. But before I do so, I do want to take a moment to talk about the nonpartisan budget staff over the last several weeks have been put under pressure that we find very unacceptable. But these folks continue to show up and do the work, staying overnight in this building and working hours that no person should have to actually work for their job. And that is because of the lawmakers. Because they did not put these people, in my mind, did not make them a priority in this conversation. We started this process, as you all know, as early as December to try to get this across the finish line faster. And yet again, we put the nonpartisan staff in a situation they should not ever have to be in. And so on behalf of the Democrats, we want to just acknowledge those folks, thank them for their work, and apologize that they were put in this situation yet again. So some of the things that the caucus, of course, are in support of: fully funding the transportation formula for our schools, funding teacher pay baseline at $40,000. Of course, we tried many times over this past year to increase teacher funding, and so we're glad to see that baseline. We know that is not going to be enough. Representative Kathy Steinhoff from Boone County really talked about that on the floor. So of course we'd like to see more, but we are happy that that does exist. Preserving a 3% increase in the higher education institutions, additional investments in things like MoExcel, of course our infrastructure funding, and multiple Democratic priorities included in the TAFP version of the budget, of course I-44, I-29 corridors as well. But there were a lot of things in this budget that were cut that are deeply important to our caucus and members and folks throughout the state, mainly within the Medicaid space. I'm going to let Representative Lavender talk to that point. But before that, I'd like to hand it over to Representative Meredith, our ranking member, for some comments.
Sure. Thank you. So, you know, I talked a lot about this on the floor, but I think our biggest concern as a caucus that we've talked a lot about here has been this process. And it's not just how it was rushed through at the end with the lack of a conference committee, with a lack of really thorough understanding of line by line what was in the budget. Honestly, it goes back to earlier in session and a budget process that became significantly less transparent. The fact that we had no opportunity to ask questions of the budget chair's sub was really unprecedented and crazy. I mean, it was a massive substitute with line after line after line, and we had no opportunity to ask questions about those lines. That's not something that has happened before, nor should it be something we accept as normal. After that, we then moved on to executive session, and in executive session, so the time that the committee is supposed to be debating and amending the bills, we actually were prevented from doing that. We were cut to, what, 3 hours when normally we take 10 to 12? So thing after thing after thing was just this loss of public input and transparency and thorough collective effort in this process. Now, the budget chair and others will come back and say, well, you know, we still had opportunity for conversations if people wanted to call me. That's missing the point. I think what we've all been saying from the beginning is this is about transparency. It's about those conversations are supposed to happen publicly. We're supposed to be publicly vetting the budget. And this year that just got shortchanged from every step from the beginning to the end. And term limits are rough, but I'm very worried that for people that are newer here, with as many of us that are leaving this year, that's gonna gradually become more the expectation, more the norm. And that's a real shame for government, for transparency, and for the public. Now, back to the budget substance, you know, I think we had some mixed feelings about a lot of things in the budget. There's some stuff that we're not as unhappy as we could have been. I think some of us thought if this went to a special session, we could end up worse off with a more draconian budget. But I think big picture, what I would like to focus on is that we are still at a place where we're just underfunding the things that matter to our state. We will still have the lowest funded K-12 schools in the country. You know, we talk about we're celebrating to some degree 3% increases in foundation formula spending or in higher ed spending. Well, as I said on the floor, 3% is less than inflation. We gave just over 3% for pay raises because that's what inflation is considered to be. But if we're not even keeping up with inflation, then whatever they want to call it, that's a cut. And we've had that year after year after year into all of these vital services. And so we have state workers that are dramatically underpaid. We've got healthcare workers that are dramatically underpaid. Teachers, could go on and on. We're paying the cost every day as a state. And guess what? It's not even saving us money as they'd like to pretend, because all those things cost us more money on the back end as well. So I'm glad we got it done, I guess, today. And I hope it's better than we would have ended up with. But this process was unacceptable. And the budget remains not good enough for the state of Missouri.
So I was intrigued when we started House Bill 11, the budget chair bragged about transparency that was in this budget and that we have flat revenue, so we can't put things in that should be ongoing cost. And then he proceeded to cut me off from being able to talk. And I don't keep tally, somebody does, of how many PQs we had on the House floor today. So I think it just belies the transparency. He says that we have enough money in Senate Bill 11 until you read the federal court ruling that says our SNAP people are out of compliance with laws. And it's because for years, historically, we have not been funding these services for people in our state. And we put in $4 million that the department asked for this year, but historically, I don't think that allows us to catch up. We cut, as Madam Leader said, Medicaid provider rates, Medicaid across the board that is going to come back in a supplemental. The money we cut for nursing homes was what the Senate put in because that's what nursing home owners said they need to have to stay afloat. We've seen, I think that the number is close to 100 nursing homes that have closed over the last decade. So not providing them the money that was put into the Senate committee sub is still going to leave them not having enough. So those are some of the things that I wasn't able to speak on the floor today because, as you saw, we were PQ'd and cut off from debate. And so any concept that this was a transparent process just belies what you've seen since the start, day after day, concluding with today.
Happy to take questions.
So the budget spends $15 billion of general revenue, but they claim that it's all under the current anticipated revenue by designating $1.3 billion of operating items as one-time expenditures. You know, you can think I-44, that's one time. There's $336 million of one-time spending in the Medicaid managed care line from general revenue. Does anybody up there anticipate that the $336 million will not be needed in the following year?
Depends how many kids they kick off Medicaid this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great response, Representative Meredith. He said it depends on how many kids we kick off. Look, since I've been here, thank you. Since I've been here, the conversation around Medicaid has been honestly the most frustrating experience in my tenure. Whether that was when the voters told us to expand Medicaid and the budget chairman refused to do so, and we had to go to a court for them to force the legislature to actually do what the voters told us to do, to the, countless children who were kicked off Medicaid whenever we do our review process, to then finding out that we're not adequately funding the programs within Medicaid that do the review process, and so therefore these children do qualify, we are just not doing our job as a legislature to fund them. When you look at the budget cuts, it's everything from the IT networks that we utilize to the staff at hand, and it's disgusting how we look at our Medicaid program in our state. And CMS itself has already told Missouri that because of this Planned Parenthood thing, that because of the defunding of Planned Parenthood that they're claiming, there's a very good chance that we could be at risk. And so of course we're gonna go back to court over that as well and waste more taxpayer money simply because the Republican leadership do not care about low-income children in our state.
Is it safe to characterize it in the way that you would have liked to spend more out of our surplus, the state surplus, on things like public services, social services?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only do we have the surplus money that we should be utilizing instead of one-time funding. One-time funding from the Biden administration was meant for investment in things like infrastructure, which we're doing in some spaces. But we have a whole lot more that we could be doing with that one-time money. I mean, heck, we could be talking about the Kansas City Chiefs if we wanted to. There's a whole lot we could be doing with that money. And instead, we're using that one-time funds for things that general revenue should be doing. And in my honest opinion, we're doing that because the Republicans continue to cut taxes for the most wealthy in our state and our corporations, and they know that we cannot sustain it. So they're not only using that money because of tax cuts, they're making it harder for individuals to receive the vital services that they desperately need because we can't afford it because of the decisions they keep making.
There's still language in the budget passed by the Senate, and then you guys just passed it, that has the anti-sanctuary city language. I mean, what is your response to that? Like, would that actually do anything to Kansas City?
Yeah, we didn't bring up the sanctuary city language because there's actually statute that already addresses this. This is already law. That was just another time that the Republicans are using something to try to win their primary elections. They wanted to call out a Democratic mayor who is quite honestly thriving more than probably any other community in our state right now, and call him out for a comment that he made when there's already statute in place where that is prevented. And so we didn't even bring it up today because it was a pointless conversation.
Governor Carson expressed discontent with the process just as much as pretty much everyone I think has, and basically said that he hadn't even seen the budget before it was presented by the Senate. Are there concerns, or maybe you welcome this, just really strict scrutiny from Carson on what this budget's going to look like? Are you expecting vetoes? He vetoed over $500 million in the budget last year.
Yeah, we definitely expect the governor's office to be very diligent in making sure that we know where this money is going and that it is appropriate. You know, the unfortunate reality is, though, he can veto things, but he can't put more money in. And that's, I think, for us, one of the most frustrating pieces. We talk about the transparency in this process. A lot of that is because so much money that we deeply cared about and we know are vital to Missouri citizens to be able to get by day to day are cut. And when the governor was making very fiscally responsible decisions, quite honestly, and it's very rare for the Democratic leader to be standing up here celebrating the Republican governor's decisions, but the budget he presented us was very different than where we are today. And so I am hopeful that he'll go through line by line. We do expect to have some vetoes, I'm sure, but the unfortunate reality is we can't increase those funds.
So I asked the budget chair about the child care subsidy rate increase that the governor asked for, and $51 million that the governor asked for to fund it. And he said, well, we funded it out of the current money by anticipating utilization that is in the historic level, not 100% utilization. And Representative Lavender spoke about this in other areas of the budget when she got a chance to speak before she was point of order. And so how much, has anybody tried to calculate how much shortfall there is in these areas where they've said you can increase the rates, but then they haven't added money to actually pay for that and expect it to come out of the current funding?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are attempting to calculate that and track all the money down. The budget chairman says, yes, we found, but again, to the point we've been making, this has not been a transparent situation. I would have loved the opportunity for our members to ask him of that question in committee and offer different ideas of how to fund that. But here's what ultimately, as a non-budget member, frankly, as a mom in our state, that is really frustrating to me about this conversation. Childcare has been an issue for so long in Missouri, something that the Democrats have been trying to address since before I got here. The very first bill that I ever filed as a Missouri lawmaker was to deal with childcare, because it is a tremendous problem in our state. But instead of actually addressing it like the governor asked us to do, like I'm grateful the governor finally is saying, yes, this is a problem, we need to do it. And not just within the budget, but also we've talked about tax credits and all these other spaces where we're trying to address this problem. Instead of doing that, what we're hearing as Republican lawmakers, Senator Moon just this week saying that our state would be better off if women were not working. And if women were not working, we would not have to pay for childcare because they would be at home. That happens to be said in this building so often. And so when the budget chairman says, oh, well, we found another way to pay for it, like, please show me. I really am looking forward to understanding all of these numbers. We will definitely soon, in the next coming days, be able to pine through this, but the reality is we know that there are too many Republicans in positions of power in this state who do not believe that I have a voice in this room, that I should not be elected standing here as a mother, and I should be at home, and I am tired of them telling us that. And I look forward to a day in our state where the governor makes that a priority and it pressures the lawmakers in this building to make sure that we are supporting those services.
Representative Lavender, you've had some very specific things that you were saying about the impact of not funding things at 100% utilization and instead relying at or the provider rate increases. What are some of the things that you think are the most likely, or the things that will not be done because of the way this budget is written now?
Our people with disabilities won't be served. 700 kids are on a waiting list and aren't being served. How is that okay? So my kid got there first, and they get state services. And your kid came later and is 690th on the list. Your kid doesn't get that service. We have children sitting in hospitals for months and years because we don't provide services. And the hospitals aren't being paid either. $6 million got taken out to take kids from hospitals and put them in treatment services. That was cut. In-home providers, our centers for independent living, help people vocationally be able to get jobs. They got a cut of $500,000 this year. They provide services for 49,000 people across the state. That's what is the harm for our low-income people, our people with disabilities. You've heard me say that for years. That's the challenge with not funding these things. And you heard me, my conundrum, oh, $17 is enough. You can't find people who will work for that. So do we have unspent money? Yeah, because the positions go open. We didn't cut it out of corrections, but we're okay to cut it out of in-home providers. So you can see the difference in priorities of caring for people in this state.